Are you ready to join me in company of the Auchroisk 11, Joshua Hatton?
Shoop. Bottle in hand, my friend.
Okay, 9 years ex-bourbon, followed by 2 years first fill Oloroso. Auchroisk,
Yeah.
let's have a quick conversation here. So obviously we've got the unpronounceable distillery, as it's sometimes affectionately known, certainly by me. Auchroisk itself, Gaelic, spanning the Red River or something like that in the original Gaelic. I'm a lowlander. I have no Gaelic training. I can only tell you what others have told me. So, but Auchroisk, a hell of a distillery, has it owned by Diageo, a style unto itself. In selection and tasting notes, even in running tastings, we often say Auchroisk. What does it taste like? Tastes like Auchroisk.
Yeah, right. I'm glad you brought up its ownership, right? It's a Diageo-owned distillery that doesn't release their own whiskeys, right? All of their production, or almost all of it, is meant to go into some sort of Johnny Walker blend. And one of the reasons that they have this distillery is, again, back to what you said, Auchroisk tastes like Auchroisk. To get their Johnny Walker blends to taste like they do, they need different whiskey styles, different distillate styles, and that ticks a box. And one of the things that I think you and I said once we first had the sample in hand, we compared this 11-year-old in sherry to the 26-year-old or whatever it was
Oh yeah,
that was in rum, right? Yeah, somewhere over there.
just half out of shot.
Yeah, there you go. Right, which was our Woodcut series, which was 21 years bourbon, 5 years Caroni rum. And from that nose to this nose, how do you describe a Auchroisk? Well, a Auchroisk is a Auchroisk, and it's coming through right here in spades.
It's green and it's nuts, but specifically cashews, which for me is such a soft nut. I had a question from long-time Nation member, Nation supporter, Lars up in Seattle.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
He got a little nervous when he saw party balloons and fresh Chuck Taylors. And for him, that spoke to sulfur. And for you and I, it did not speak to sulfur.
Not at all.
It spoke to a heft, a distinction in the Sherry Cask influence upon this spirit. Is there another way you would describe our party balloons and fresh Chuck Taylors?
Well, I guess I would argue if you ever had a pair of fresh Chuck Taylors, they don't smell of sulfur, right? It's that canvas, it's that rubber. It has a very specific smell, which can oftentimes, at least for me, bring you back to your childhood days, right? Where, you're wearing them and they, I don't know. It's like any whiskey, right? You smell it and it transports you. For me, that smell of the Chuck Taylors transports me back to my youth. Not a sulfur connection into the party balloons. Again, it's going to get those balloons for your kids for their birthday. It's not sulfur. It just transports you to a time and place, and that's how I tend to think of it.
Yeah, speaking of that transportation, and I said this on the podcast, thanks to longtime listeners tuning into the tasting video, I talked about this nose and palate, this whiskey transporting me back to my student flat in Aberdeen when I was just getting into whiskey. And this tastes like old whiskey.
Yeah.
And then testing that hypothesis, I put the sample that you and I selected from in front of Bill Thomas at Jack Rose Dining Saloon, another longtime supporter of the nation. And I said, what do you think about that Auchroisk? He said, I like that a lot. It tastes familiar. I said, do you get a sense of old style whiskey from this? And he said, I do. I definitely do. And it's again, it's that hefty grain meeting that nutty quality that gives you layers to the experience.
Yeah.
I love the way it layers. Then I go back to the nose, the sherry, the grain, the nuttiness.
Yeah, and across the palate, I mean, back to that grain, it's almost like crushed malted milk balls, right? Maltesers or Whoppers for us here in the US. It's that nuttiness meets cereal, meets chocolate. There's a fruitiness as it gets towards the
Yep.
finish, almost like wine gums or like fruit chew kind of things.
Yeah, there's a note that we talk here about malted cereal being crushed by a bicycle tire. And that bicycle tire echoes the party balloons and fresh Chuck Taylors from the nose. Like this this fruit from the Sherry Cask
Hmm.
is still traveling through this experience. And I chuckled a second ago. I nosed it and tasted it. And suddenly, not only was I in that Aberdeen flat, I had my dad standing beside me,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Like it's that memory. And what have we always talked about with my dad? Glenfarclas, right?
Yeah.
When we were in that Aberdeen flat, Glenfarclas was his thing. This has a certain grain sherry partnership that puts me in mind of some of those Glenfarclases we were drinking and bottling in the 90s.
Yeah.
We being, at that point, the Whiskey Society,
Yep.
bottling the Glenfarclas in the 90s. And it just keeps transporting me back. It just keeps reminding me of that era of whiskey production. What's our distillation? 2012 on this,
Isn't that
right?
funny?
Right? A 2012 distillation that really echoes what was being put out in the 90s. Yeah. I said it again. I said it on the podcast. I'll say it here on the recording.
Hmm.
This is my favorite of these four. They're all my children. I love them all. I'll be sharing them all through the next, 3 months and at tastings. But this Thrusk is that kind of special one where you want to take someone to the side and say, you might not fully appreciate what's happening here, right? If you picked up whiskey in a different
Yes.
generation, you might not quite grasp what's happening here. Let me talk to you about this.
Mhm.
This is the Thrusk for me.
Yep.
Really
Yeah.
special whiskey.
Yeah, it's a great distillery, a great bottling to champion, a great distillery to champion. So I would argue this is our second Thrusk. There's a good chance we're gonna continue bottling these because the spirit
Yeah.
is consistent, the spirit is delicious. Um,
Yeah.
it's an
But
11
just
years
very,
old.
very
Yeah,
quickly, the,
yeah.
the thing I keep saying to people is if you've trusted us on Dalyuen and Inchgour, here comes a Thrusk. We're going to be talking a Thrusk. You're going to hear this from us because we believe in it. We absolutely believe in it.
Isn't there a song? Here comes a Thrusk. Doo doo doo.
Doo-doo-doo-doo.
So 11 years old, 9 years in bourbon, 2 years in sherry, first fill Oloroso, 56.7% alcohol. $120 is the bottle price.
Nice.
There are still bottles remaining on our website, so head off to singlecastnation.com. If you are not a member, you can easily become one. You just click the contact and fill out the form that makes you a member, or you could just purchase a bottle and you become a member automatically. So,
That's the best way to do it. Get a
right.
bottle, become a member, join us. You too can become a long-time supporter of the nation. It starts today.
Well, there
Yeah,
you go.
can I quickly give the tasting note because you were just commenting on the label tasting note yesterday,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
it has given us a chuckle along the
Oh,
way.
please do.
So,
Yeah.
all right, last comment, then we'll get a cheers and we'll be out of here. A Thrusk is often spoken about in hushed tones as the distillery reserved for those whiskey geeks with something of a specialist leaning. We can't all attend furry conventions, but we can all take delight in the special nature of a good Thrusk. Please welcome a good Thrusk into your life. And I say cheers.
Cheers, big ears.
Cheers.